One of the best arguments against video games being art is probably the abundance of successful remakes. Art is supposed to be timeless, and remakes and other formats rarely match up to the originals. Video games age like milk left in the sun, that was poured by Bill Cosby, while riding an NFT. They straddle a blurry line between art and electronic entertainment products, where a few extra gigahertz and gigabytes can objectively improve the experience. The earliest and most crude 3D games can benefit immensely from overhauls on better hardware, but the returns have diminished when moving on to newer games, with the results inching ever closer to nostalgia-mining cash-grab movie remake territory. I've commented on this with a few recent remakes, but Silent Hill 2 is an especially interesting case since this is one of the most commonly cited examples of a game being art. For those unfamiliar, you take on the role of Fartface.
Fartface.
Who's drawn to the abandoned town of Silent Hill by a mysterious letter from his dead wife, Mrs. Fartface. It is an uncompromising and at times shocking dive into psychological trauma, something far more dependent on the talent and judgment of the artist than the number of gigaflops in the machine. Right from the remake's reveal, there were concerns about the actual substance of the story being lost amid the flashy upgrades. But the original is also undeniably janky and clumsy to play as a game, with stiff animations, awkward controls, and a host of other dated elements that do lend themselves easily to a tech upgrade. So the prospect of Bloober remaking this was exciting and deeply concerning at the same time. The short version is that they mostly succeeded on both the art and game fronts, but it's a messy victory. On the tech side, the upgrade is straightforward and it is massive. The gigafloops are on full display from the start, with incredible realism and immersion that does justice to the style of the original. Bloober has made Silent Hill real, and it's exactly as rusty, grimy, and bleak as it needed to be. The new over-the-shoulder camera allows you to take in much more of the town and investigate it as if you're really there. I don't mind the loss of fixed cameras in this case because they were never really fixed, almost always showing the action from the wrong angle and swinging wildly as you moved. I've argued for them in Resident Evil, but they just didn't work as well here, and the new system allows details and clues to sprawl across the entire 3D space in a way that fixed cameras wouldn't have. The perspective really changes how you perceive some locations. The cemetery feels much smaller when you can take it all in at once. Some places have been boosted in size to accommodate this, but never to the extent that they lose the original feel. Details that used to need the help of text to interpret clearly are now as plain as day on their own. There are decisions like James not using his sullied hand after reaching into a toilet that show the consideration Bloober has given to the most minute details. Ray tracing is put to better use than in any other game I've played, making a genuine contribution to the atmosphere rather than coming off as a tech flourish. HDR is also leveraged well, with the blinding transitions to the outside world selling the isolating darkness of the interiors better. Flames are convincingly searing, and that effect is tastefully applied throughout the game. They've also worked in more variety, with small changes like covering the third floor of Woodside in tarps, and bigger changes, like making the other world much more distinct from the normal one. In the original, the apartment complex is mostly blurred together. Now it's immediately clear you've stepped across some kind of terrible boundary. Masahiro Ito returned to oversee the art direction, and all the revised enemy designs look outstanding. Not just the models themselves, but the higher quality animations. They also sound outstanding. The original's disorienting use of audio is pushed even further. Enemies always sound closer than they really are, to the point of inducing panic in dark rooms. I've never heard so much wet squelching in my damn life, and even more unexplained phenomena explode out of nowhere. Akira Yamaoka also returned to oversee the soundtrack, and the in-game music is as effective as it ever was. I appreciate that they didn't pull a Resident Evil 2 here and instead kept the score mostly intact. The jazzier cutscene tracks are kind of underwhelming though. The crunchier, heavily compressed samples just suited the tone better.
Is this your only special place?
Am I crazy?
It's not a major downgrade, but if someone made a mod for the original tracks, I would probably use it. Most of the iconic scenes are safe, one-to-one recreations of the originals, but with some more dynamic cutting and camera work. Even so, it feels like there's an extra dimension gained by the new face and motion capture, after getting used to the new level of nuance, where every small tick and eye movement is captured. Going back to the old, vaguely monsterish PS2 models with their robotic Chuck E. Cheese blinking is jarring. The immersion is also improved by losing the distracting cuts between FMVs and the wildly different gameplay models. A few action-oriented scenes suffer from running animations looking universally weird, but even when a remade scene is awkwardly performed, the original is almost always 10 times clunkier, so I can't fault them much.
I'm not like you.
Are you afraid?
I still prefer some of the original performances.
Anyway, I'm glad you're alive.
Anyway? What do you mean, anyway? Anyway? What do you mean, anyway?
But Bloober mostly did a great job bringing the story forward. They've even added some completely new scenes and endings, all of which are surprisingly pretty good. The dark edge of the original is also mostly intact. Some of Pyramid Head's most disturbing moments have been heavily trimmed or even removed, but I wouldn't call it censorship. The higher level of fidelity makes some of the other creatures more horrifying than they were before. I'm trying to avoid overt spoilers, but there is a new phase added to one boss that elevates the concept into something more viscerally terrifying. Not because the monster is more dangerous, but because of how effectively trauma has been made playable. It's one of the boldest and, in my opinion, best changes, and Ito himself has praised the addition. New elements like this arise all over the game. Sudden storms force you to take shelter, adding a newfound sense that you're trapped in the buildings you enter. A late area has power failures that pressure you to keep throwing switches as you explore. Taken together, the tweaks and upgrades make it feel like you've truly burrowed deep into hell. But all of that great work is undermined by constant tech issues. The game stutters like mad, and while the first big update added a compilation pass at startup, it doesn't seem to change much. The beautifully recreated introduction beautifully shits itself during the transition to gameplay. I repeated this several times and got the same result. I don't think my hardware is to blame, and I didn't see slowdown like this anywhere else. A lot of animations are locked to 30 FPS and look off when playing at higher rates, which feels like it shouldn't be a thing these days. For all the detailed graphics options provided, it didn't seem possible to do 16:9 on an ultra-wide screen. I tried borderless mode, forcing 16:9 in the driver, and all the tricks that normally work. The game either just overruled the settings or ended up stretched. This was a problem mostly because I was capturing for YouTube, but a normal player may want to limit the ratio to save on performance. The fully opaque rain looks terrible and blocks you from seeing more than 5 feet out, which I don't assume is deliberate. If you saw the early Resident Evil 4 Remake footage, it's basically that problem. There are random flashes that can be very bright when HDR is on, which also seem like unintentional glitches. That fancy RT lighting constantly flickers and shimmers to the point of becoming a distraction. I tried forcing ray reconstruction on and it does help with that, but it seemed to cause more bugs than it was worth. Fans on PC have tried to mod the myriad of issues away, but with how far Bloober has gone to make this world look great, I hope they just take the few extra steps needed to patch it themselves. There's also no gyro aim. Steam Input can handle it, but that puts you in a bind if you want to use the native DualSense features on PC. There's much more shooting in this than the original, which is where the modern Resident Evil influence is most clear. You don't get enough ammo to do everything with guns. Your allowance is 2 to 3 shots per enemy, just enough to soften them up for a melee attack. The old enemies were chumps that didn't pose much of a threat unless they cornered you. Even with the clumsy controls, you almost had to try to take damage from them. You could mostly ignore them and walk by, and if you did engage them, the combat was robotic and awkward. Every enemy in the remake is a threat. They grab you, snipe you with puke, and leap through the air. They're spongy enough that you can't use melee without facing a few attacks yourself, and even one hit will drop your health to caution. The new dodge mechanic isn't there as a gimmick. You heavily depend on it to stay alive. Bloober borrowed RE4's knee shot mechanic, which is really helpful for setting mannequins up for easy takedowns. The problem is that the default magnetism pulls you towards the body, so you have to fight against it to take advantage of free aim or disable it, and rely on the fiddly stick-only movement. Apart from the gyro begging, I'm okay with how they've transformed the gameplay. It's more action-oriented, but it's not an action game, and you still have to get James's hands plenty dirty to finish off each and every enemy, but it does go off the rails with the congestion of mannequins in the second half of the game. You'll be trapped in tight rooms where the camera's blocked, the spongy enemies won't drop, and you can't stomp the ones that do fast enough because James misses half the time. While dealing with one enemy, you'll be sucker punched in the back by another, and you often can't run because some exploding crawler is blocking the doorway with acid. Welcome to Clusterfuck Hill. They also went completely overboard with the hiding mannequins. Initially, it's really creepy to see them lying in wait for you, but they run this into the ground so hard it becomes a tired joke by the midpoint. I'm occupied. Oh, sorry. I've really gotta go.
No. Get out!
You'll become adept at dodging by sound alone, since no matter where you look, a mannequin is springing out of the darkness behind you. Instead of soaking in the atmosphere while exploring, you have to methodically raid every room like a SWAT team member, clearing corners. It's so completely obnoxious I'm surprised the game made it through playtesting like this. I can forgive the original game's clunkiness because it was never about the combat, but here they've made it much more of a focus, so it's much more of a problem. That problem is exacerbated by the padded out areas you have to fight through. The game is at least twice as long as before, and some of the expansions are welcome. The path to town requires trips into buildings that were just facades in the original, and the town itself has to be thoroughly explored before unlocking the apartments. In the original, you could blow the town off and go directly to Woodside, detouring only once for the key. I was able to reach the lobby in 11 minutes. In the remake, I didn't get there until an hour in, by which point in the original I had met Maria and reached the hospital. A clock puzzle used to require just finding a key and turning the hands. Now each of the 3 hands has to be collected from its own wing of the building. They've added more shortcut unlocks and fire escapes to improve the flow of backtracking through the larger areas, but in the hospital I could feel the pace dragging considerably. Returning to the original, so many of the iconic scenes are delivered back to back. You run into Eddie and Angela just minutes apart. The remake has a diluted quality, where those memorable moments are separated by a ton of this. The good stuff is worth powering through, but less would have been more in some areas. I'm not familiar with Bloober's other work, but I understood the concerns, and I saw the video.
The asset is loading right here. Fucking imagine why you would have to do this!
Konami also lost the trust of pretty much everyone when they decided they just plumb didn't feel like making games anymore, right in the middle of making 2 of the most anticipated games of the generation. I guess it's natural that some people wanted this duo to fail, but the hostility isn't warranted by the game itself. The remake delivers in the narrative areas where people were most skeptical. If anything weighs it down, it's the gameplay side of things, with the excessive expansions and fumbling action. But I still consider this a good game and recommend playing it, whether you're a fan of the original or not. Everyone knows 7 is the lowest score there is, so I'll even give it a half point of tilt. It's good enough that I'd like to see Bloober take on the original, which was in much more dire need of an overhaul anyway. So get the farts out of your face for 5 seconds and give it a chance.